Sure. John Stedman.
Here.
Lang Sly.
Here.
Betsy Kramer. Michael Nelson.
Here.
Jim Sloan.
Here.
Bill Spicer.
Here.
Merritt McRae told me in advance that he will not be present tonight.
Very well.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we'd like to move item 2 to after item 4. So we'll do the minutes and then move to item 3.
Very good. So item 2 comes after. All right, thank you. All right, would you like to read agenda item 1?
Sure. Item 1, approval of the minutes. A recommendation that Harbor Commission waive further reading and approve the minutes from the regular meeting of November 21, 2019.
So moved.
I second. We have a second? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions?
Aye.
You need to abstain.
Oh, you need to abstain?
You weren't here.
Oh, I was there. Okay.
Yeah, Chair Stedman, Commissioner Nelson needs to abstain. He wasn't in attendance at the last meeting.
Very well.
So we have one abstention.
Sorry.
Sorry.
All right, as long as it was- Okay,
I'm only going to say yes to that.
all right.
Hi.
So,
Your mic's not on. Thanks.
it's showing green.
That is
How's that?
good.
Better?
Yes.
All right, guys. All right, so let's move on to item number 3.
I'll read number 3. Item 3, reappointment of Merritt McRae to the commission. Commissioner McRae has been reappointed to serve a 4-year term expiring on December 31, 2023.
Excellent. So I'd like to thank Merritt for his recent term of service. Anyone else want to offer up any comments on Merritt?
Congratulations on being reappointed.
Yeah, exactly. Too bad he's not here to. Yeah, exactly.
He's in Portland. I've spent the last 2 days with him, so.
Oh, okay. Very well. So he's
He's at
well
a
and
fisheries.
healthy?
He's at a fisheries management conference.
Excellent.
In Portland.
All right. Well, I'll expect a full report when he returns.
Oh, you will get it.
Okay. Perfect. So we will move on to item number 4.
Okay, item number 4, appointment of Michael Nelson to the Harbor Commission. Commissioner Nelson has been appointed to serve a 4-year term expiring on December 31, 2023.
Chair Stedman and Commissioners, we welcome Commissioner Michael Nelson. Mike grew up on the Chesapeake Bay in Crisfield, Maryland, a small fishing village. His first job was pulling blue crab pots with his grandfather on Pocomoke Sound, so he's got salt water in his veins. Mike was an executive for more than 30 years with the Maryland and California Natural Resources Departments. Spent much of his early career directing Maryland's land and water conservation program. During his career, assignments included management of the Waterway Improvement Division, a statewide commercial and recreational boating grant and loan program, as well as responsibility for Summers Cove Marina, a self-sufficient 500-slip harbor on the Lower Bay. He also served as executive officer of the San Diego River Conservancy, managed a state agency created to restore 52-mile urban stream valley in California's second most populous metropolitan area. Most recently, he served locally as executive director of the Ealings Park Foundation, which for decades has funded the operation of a 230-acre urban park from user fees, revenues generating enterprises, and donations and grants. Mike is currently a volunteer program officer for the Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara, working to achieve the organization's priorities, particularly those involving intergovernmental relations, program development, and grant funding. He also cultivates collaborative relationships with new public and private partners, donors, investors, and nonprofits. We congratulate Mike on his appointment to the Harbor Commission and look forward to working with him on a variety of waterfront issues over the next 4 years.
Hear, hear. Congratulations. So my question is, who wrote that bio? Is that the? We worked together.
Right.
Very, very comprehensive. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Again, look forward to serving with you.
Thank
All right. Now we've reordered this agenda, so we are actually going to move to item number 2 now.
Item 2, status of the waterfront director appointment.
Welcome, Administrator Casey.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'm Paul Casey. I'm the City Administrator, and I'm pleased today to welcome and introduce you to Mike Wilshire, the new Waterfront Director. I wanted to give you just a brief recap about the process that we went through and then let Mr. Wilshire come up and say a few words to you as well. If you recall, I was with you, I believe, in August or September with the vacancy in the Waterfront Director and began the process for the recruitment and got information from you and from Waterfront staff and other community leaders about some of the qualities we want to look for. I want to recognize the three gentlemen sitting to my left and thank them very, very much for their leadership to the department during this interim period. Mr. Bossi and Mr. Triberg took turns as acting waterfront director, and Mr. Engelbretson also has been serving in an acting capacity as well. They are outstanding city employees. They continue to serve the department very well, and I really appreciate them stepping up during this transition period. So once we had an idea of the types of qualities we were looking for a waterfront director, we started a recruitment. We did a national recruitment. We got 23 applicants, which I think for a waterfront director is a good, solid recruitment. There aren't a lot of working commercial harbors of our size to be drawing from talent pool-wise, but we had applicants from all up and down the coast of California and including some outside of California. So it was a good recruitment in that regard. We narrowed the field down to 7 finalists that we interviewed, had an interview panel consisting of a city department head, an assistant city manager from a coastal city in California that has a working harbor, a harbor director from a nearby working harbor, and 2 members of your commission. So I want to thank Mr. Sloan and Mr. Sai for working on that full day of interviewing people. It's a long day. It's tiring to be intent and listening carefully to 7 applicants talk about their qualities. Through that process, they recommended that I interview 4 people that came out of that process. And so I did follow-up interviews, and out of that, I made a recommendation to you all in a closed session last week and then to City Council on Tuesday, who confirmed my appointment of Mr. Wilshire as Waterfront Director. He currently works for the City of Santa Barbara as our Facilities and Energy Manager. He's been with the city since 2013, I believe. I'll let him explain some of his prior experiences, which I think are relevant to this position as well. But everyone who works with Mike thinks extremely highly of him. He is very competent, very smart and talented, very personable, collaborative, and I think will be a great waterfront director. And so I'd like to introduce Mr. Wilshire for you.
Mr. Casey. Chair Stedman, Commissioners, first say thank you to you. Thanks to the Harbor Commission. And I want to also thank Council and the City and obviously the waterfront staff, Mr. Triberg and Mr. Bossi and Eric. I really appreciate what they're doing, and I've worked with them in the past and have a great working relationship with them. This is hopefully going to be a great fit for me. I grew up on a small island in the Pacific Northwest, so I also grew up around the ocean. I sailed with my father and fished with my father growing up and have sailed since and been somewhat tied to the ocean. Prior to being with the city, I worked extensively in offshore oil and gas industry, both here locally in the Santa Barbara Channel and abroad internationally in the Indian Ocean and kind of all over the place. Public Works has been my home for the last 6 years. It's been fantastic. I love working with the city, and I will miss the Public Works Department, but I'm very, very excited to join the Waterfront Department. My official start date's February 1, so the department's still in the capable hands of Mr. Triberg and the waterfront staff. But I look forward to everything that's going to come and working with you all in the future. So thank you.
You're welcome, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the intro, Mr. Casey. All righty. So now we will move on to item 5. Thanks.
Item 5, Commission Committee Assignments. Recommendation that Harbor Commission review and update as necessary membership on various Harbor Commission committees per the Board of Harbor Commission rules adopted September 16, 2010.
Chair Stedman, as most of you know, we normally do committee assignments in July. Recently, Commissioner Shoham Yaniv was not reappointed, so it left a few vacancies on our different committees. So now is the time to take a look at those if you'd like to fill those vacancies. I just wanted to mention that the local coastal program update, the local coastal program was approved by the Coastal Commission a couple months ago, so there's kind of no reason to meet on that particular committee anymore. You may wish to dissolve that committee at this time. But I do recommend appointing someone to the Parking Committee and the Commercial Fishing Committee. Those are both topics of great importance to the waterfront, and we should continue having our committee meetings as necessary.
Yes,
Could you
Commissioner
run
Sloan.
through which are statutory committees and which are ad hoc?
The standing committees, I think these are all standing committees. Excuse me. The ad hoc committees were the Marina Key Card Policy Committee, which we could also dissolve because that's kind of done for now because that was a one-time item, and the local coastal program's over. But the others are standing committees, so we would like to keep those as standing committees so that we can continue to meet as necessary as issues relevant to each of those committees come up over time.
So the local coastal program and the Marina Key Card,
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of done with the Marina Key Card exchange program. I don't see a reason to meet on it or to keep that committee intact anymore. So it's up to you. We can, perhaps something will come up, but it's really up to the discretion of the commission to decide.
parking was an ad hoc, and then didn't we dissolve it and then bring it back or something?
I don't remember, but we have some pending items that are still important. I know that we rolled out some very important and relevant changes to our parking regulations, but there are still some outstanding things to come. So I would recommend that you keep that committee.
Okay.
Commissioner Kramer?
Yeah. Carl, I'm on the parking committee. It's so listed on the page here, but not listed there, so.
Oh, thank you for the correction. You're absolutely right. Chair Stedman, Commissioner Kramer, I'm sorry it was just inadvertently deleted. You are on the parking committee. Thank you. But there is still a vacancy on the
Yes,
parking committee.
exactly.
I was looking at it a moment ago, well, we have 3 for everything. And it just occurred to me that, yeah, you're not there. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay, so I guess,
If it's appropriate, I have been involved with the Commercial Fishing Committee since its inception and have had some engagement on the issue before it was created. And if it was possible and the other commissioners are willing to allow it, I would very much like to serve on that subcommittee.
thank you very much.
Do you see a conflict?
Chair Stedman, Commissioner Sloan, I believe Commissioner Nelson met with the city attorney over this particular issue. We did talk a little bit about it, and so I defer to him because he met with the city attorney recently, and I assume that he's...
No, we met 2 weeks ago, and his principal issue was an economic or financial interest, which I certainly don't have. However, in the event that there was a contract, he asked me to let's talk about that before a vote or decision was made on that. And of course, I agreed and said that whatever he said, if it was necessary to recuse myself, of course, I would do just that. So,
Are you satisfied with that, Director?
Yes, I am.
Schreiber?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
From the city attorney as well.
Very well. Are there any other or questions generally about these committee assignments? So I think we should take a motion to absolve 2 of these committees. Is that correct?
Yes.
The local coastal program update and the Marina Key Card Policy
So
Committee.
I would make a motion to do that, to dissolve those 2, the LCP and the Marina Key Card, and appoint Commissioner Nelson to the Commercial Fishing.
Okay.
Second.
That's one big motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye? All those opposed? Any abstentions?
We still have parking.
All right, now we still have a vacancy for parking, so who's gonna, do we have any volunteers? Lang?
Yeah, no one else wants to, yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Sure, okay. I'd like to make a motion to add Commissioner Sly to the Parking Committee.
I would second that.
Very well. All those in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, I think you're updated now, Director Triberg. well. So now we'll move on to, we're back on track now with these agenda item numbers, all right? That's correct. Okay. So we're going to move to item number 6, which is the department update.
Chair Stedman and Commissioners, we had one council item since we last met, and that was the approval of a lease agreement with the Boat Launch Mini Mart LLC for a term of 5 years with one 5-year option. We've had several meetings, and one of which I attended was called the Alternative Use of the Oil Platform Expo, held on November 20th by the Maritime Museum. The goal of the expo was to inform and educate the public about different options available for creating alternative uses of the Santa Barbara Channel oil platforms, as many of them head towards decommissioning. The State Lands Commission will begin the environmental review process for Platform Holly, located off of Goleta, which is within the state waters, within 3 miles. And this review process and ultimate decision on decommissioning will kind of set the precedent for what might happen to the other rigs. I believe there's 9 rigs in the channel. This is going to be a really relevant and up-and-coming issue, similar to probably like the marine protected areas. I see this as something of great importance and interest to the Harbor Commission and the harbor community. A lot of money involved, a lot of alternatives involved, and it's very interesting. And a quick plug for the Maritime Museum. They have a lot of really neat and interesting topics. I was really impressed. There must have been 150 people there. Great presenter, probably 10 different presenters, and it was really good and really informative. And as it becomes relevant, is relevant to the Harbor Commission, we'll keep you updated on this particular topic. The Harbor Commission Commercial Fishing Subcommittee met on December 10th to review parcels with the proper zoning that include commercial fishing facilities as an allowed use. This is an ongoing effort. It was well attended. We did narrow down the number of parcels that we should be looking at to help accommodate commercial fishing uses. Jim Turner with the Radius Group was there to kind of help us along. We came up with a few action items, some for the commercial fishermen and some for us. We're probably going to resume this effort over the next couple of months and report back to you. We're going to bring Mike up to speed on this effort. It's an important issue for the harbor community. So we'll be back probably in several months on this particular item. On December 19th, we held a public meeting regarding the East Beach Mooring Program. At the November Harbor Commission meeting, we talked about updating or revising the uses allowed. That meeting was well attended by a lot of commercial fishermen, but we identified some issues related to those additional allowed uses, such as moorings for seafood products. So we're going to revise our project description and reach out to the regulatory agencies that permit this, such as the Coastal Commission. I'd have to work with California Fish and Wildlife and a few others, and talk to them first about whether or not it's allowed, which I assume it is. And if it is, then we'll probably go back and look at some code changes and then come back to you, the Harbor Commission, with those code changes, and the Ordinance Committee and ultimately Council. So that's a couple months out, but that's still an item.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner.
I'd just like to thank Carl because the whole idea of having a public outreach on this issue was so well received by the commercial fishermen. And the conclusion was that it was a great thing that the waterfront staff did by securing the authority and the permission and a permit from the Coastal Commission. And don't lose that. That's a real asset and one that we ought to be able to work together to figure out the appropriate use for. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah, I thank you as well on that. I have a quick question. I know there was some discussion about a reduction of, or a movement of the mooring field to accommodate some of this seafood storage. Is that, have we made any progress on that?
Yeah, Chair Stedman, and thank you, Commissioner Nelson, for your comments and for attending the meetings. It's one of the things we'll be looking at. The most important thing to look at first and foremost is whether or not storing seafood products out there crosses the line of what is mariculture and the regulations associated with mariculture. I don't think that's kind of the intent. The commercial fishermen store seafood products on the ocean and the harbor all over the place right now, and that's kind of how we want to advance that, because we don't want to complicate this with a mariculture type component that would involve much greater regulations. We also talked a little bit about reducing the size of it, because some of the moorings are in state waters. State waters is defined in 1925, half mile offshore, because no one's on those moorings right now, and we're spending $3,500 or $4,000 a year for a lease with the state. So we're going to look at reducing those, and that'll be part of this process. We'll first and foremost deal with the regulatory agencies, and then come back and gauge the demand and whether or not we should not renew our lease. We'd still have the authority to use those. We just wouldn't renew the lease and actually pay the fee to not use the moorings. But there is some of the commercial fishermen would like the notion of having an area to store seafood products further offshore where theoretically the water's cleaner.
Right.
So it's part of the discussion. We'll bring all that back to you in due time.
Excellent. Thanks for tying that up.
Okay, and finally, we have a couple agenda items for February. The Sea Center is going to make a presentation on the White Abalone Recovery Program. They were supposed to come here tonight, but they couldn't make it, so they'll be here next month. They've confirmed that. This was at the request of Commissioner Kramer. And then Brian will be doing a mid-year budget status update next February. And then just looking out a little bit further, because it's a relevant topic, in March we'll be bringing the sea level rise adaptation plan to the full commission. So I'll be making a presentation with the planning staff at that time. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions? Please let me know.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, so we move on to item number 7, the business services report.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. This month's report is on leasing activity within the Waterfront Department. And just to set your frame of reference, the Waterfront Department manages 61 different leases and or license agreements, both within the harbor itself as well as Stearns Wharf. We have a staff of 1 that does that, our senior property management specialist, Pat Henry, and of course myself. I assist with that. And just to let you know, it's a very active group of tenants, both individually but also as a group. We participate in the Stearns Wharf Business Association and their regular meetings, as well as the Harbor Merchants Association, who also meet on a somewhat regular basis. Again, we are 100% full, so much so that we get regular inquiries on an almost weekly basis of people interested in possible leasing opportunities within the waterfront. And again, 100% full. What we do with those folks is put them on an interested parties list. And then on the rare occasion that a lease opportunity does come available, we will then reach out to those folks and conduct a very public request for proposal process, and it runs its course. So that's kind of your frame of reference. Again, 61 different leases and license agreements. And looking back at calendar year 2019, there was moderate activity as far as leases are concerned. It kind of comes and goes depending on who's up and who's not. So in 2019, we had leases come before you, the Santa Barbara Youth Sailing Foundation, Deep Blue Sea was a lease assignment, basically a transfer of ownership. The Mariansky and Turner office lease. We did a lease with the California Sea Urchin Commission, the Santa Barbara chapter. And just to let you know, those are the folks formerly the Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara Incorporated. We did an amendment with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration regarding their vessel Shearwater. We did another lease assignment with Blue Water Hunter, one of our local dive shops. We had completed a lease with Marine Services as well as Harbor Marine Works, and lastly, as Carl just mentioned, the Boat Launch Mini Mart. So a pretty active year as far as leases and license agreements are concerned. And again, we have a schedule, so we kind of know what's coming up, but every year something different happens. As you can see, we had an amendment, 2 different assignments. So it's always interesting to see what comes before us and what comes before your commission. Looking ahead to 2020, pretty quiet year. We have the Santa Barbara Sailing Club, their lease is coming up. The Brophy Brothers office lease is coming up, as well as Meyer Marine. And then we have 1 license agreement currently slated, and that's our internet provider down in the harbor, and that's Echo Wireless. So kind of a small year for 2020, but looking ahead, 2021 is a very busy year. If you remember 5 years ago, we basically, the overwhelming majority of leases on Stearns Wharf will be coming before you. So quite an active year. I want to say there are 16 leases or license agreements coming forward in 2021. So now you know what you've got ahead of you. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yes, Commissioner Kramer.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I've got a question not necessarily to do with leases, but I remember there was some comment that there would be a coffee shop by Sea Landing at some point. Has there been anything more said about that? It was mentioned about a year or so ago. I don't think I dreamt it, but maybe I did.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kramer, I think there's been discussion for quite a long time regarding Sea Landing, and they do have a provision in their lease that allows them to put some sort of food component within in the building. They've never moved forward with that. As you know, they're kind of dealing with some other issues at the current time. So it is a provision within their lease that if they choose to do that, they could effectuate that part of their lease. I don't have any current information as to if they want to do that or not.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, Carl and I have had a conversation about an orientation for me, because there's a lot that I don't know. And if it would be possible, it would be great if Carl could do a orientation for me, because I'm very interested in the guidelines. I know there was a presentation on the guidelines for the leasing program, and I'm very interested also in the status of like the harbor dredging and that sort of thing. And I don't know what the interaction is with the Corps of Engineers and what qualifies us. And just for background, I'd like to know that. And if we could schedule that, that would be fantastic. No rush, no urgency.
Chair Stedman, Commissioner Nelson, we put it off awaiting the new director. So
That's fine.
we'll probably have it in the next few weeks, depending on his schedule. But
That's great.
before the next Harbor Commission meeting,
Okay.
certainly.
Well, I'm sure they'll make sure you get a ride on a Harbor Patrol boat as well.
Of course.
So, was the issue of, that Commissioner Sly brought up about these extensions in the leases, that was fully aired?
Mr. Chair, we came back with an item based on Commissioner Sly's comments in November about our waterfront lease guidelines. So I imagine that did address his concerns and how we come up with our leases and the processes we go through to put those into play.
And that's also was set up pretty well, I think, in the minutes from last time.
Right. So, okay. I just wanted to make sure we put a bow on that, too. Okay. Excellent, Brian. Thank you. All right. Let's move on to the next item, which is facilities.
Okay, Chair Stedman and Commissioners, starting off with the facilities update tonight. At the November Harbor Commission meeting, I reported on the Corps of Engineers 3-year dredging contract that was recently let and awarded to Pacific Dredge with a low bid of $6 million. Also at that time, I mentioned to you that that bid was protested by the only other bidder, Curtin Maritime, who bid $12 million and was going to have their bid rejected anyways. Nevertheless, the Corps of Engineers took the bid protest seriously. It had to go to the South Pacific Division. The way the Corps is organized, they have districts, the LA District, and they have divisions. The South Pacific Division is all the way up north, and it's just another layer of their process with a 35-day review period. Well, they took 35 days exactly, and it resulted in about a 2-month delay. Fortunately, it was dismissed last week, and we just had our first kickoff meeting yesterday, as a matter of fact. Just by way of review, this is the dredge sandpiper, dredging right off the tip of the sand spit. This is where the majority of the sand is and the majority of the work. They got their notice to proceed today to begin the fall cycle dredging. And by fall cycle dredging, I mean the fall of 2019, beginning in February 2020. But just by way of reference, as Commissioner Nelson, as you'll learn, you'll hear many of these presentations, they typically dredge it once in the fall and once in the spring. And unfortunately, we had a long delay. The last time we delayed the fall dredging, the harbor closed. So we got lucky this time. They should be dredging by February 3rd. One thing I'd like to note is the discharge pipe will be opposite the Cabrillo ball fields. Dredging will take place for about 7 to 10 days. This is a cool little drone shot that I believe Chris Bell, our administrative analyst, took. It's what it looks like. All the sand on East Beach is there as a result of dredging, and it's difficult to overstate the importance of dredging to Santa Barbara's beaches. The beaches would not occur. It looks like this immediately after creates this sort of peninsula that's food rich for seabirds. And then over the course of the next couple of months, it spreads out and nourishes all the beaches all the way down past the Cabrillo Pavilion. But fortunately, we'll be getting started soon. I'll report on you on the progress. We also, at the November Commission meeting, I mentioned an interior dredging project, and this is to deal with some shoaling that occurs between Marina 1 and the breakwater. It was last done in 2006. The breakwater is porous. It's made from quarried rock from Fry Harbor on Santa Cruz Island, and the sand pushes through it, although over the years we've filled a lot of the voids with grout, but there's a couple areas where it still pushes through. Two of those areas are opposite. D1 was notified. There's by the Santa Barbara Youth Sailing Foundation dock and over by G-Finger, where as it encroaches, it goes across that channel and makes it difficult for boats to get by. We have been working with Port San Luis over years, borrowing and exchanging equipment information. It's a little bit hard to see in this. I don't know if I have a pointer, but there, you can see this is a submersible pump, frequently called a Toyo pump, that we've borrowed from them, and we borrowed from them again. And it's, thank you, Brian, that black thing right there. So the Danny C is a local utility vessel owned by Danny Castagnola, and fortunately, this pump can be deployed from the Danny C. The sand is discharged through a pipe that's held by a forklift on the walkway, allowing people to pass with the discharged sediments going right over the breakwater. We did this a much larger scale project in 2006, and it works really quite well and allows people to still walk out there. So to put this into kind of context, before at low tide, you can see these shoals gradually kind of pushing through in various areas. Back in 2006, the whole thing was probably halfway across, so the grouting of the voids has really made a big difference. But that's the before and after. So this works pretty good. It's a very efficient way to dredge these kind of sediments. It's really difficult to get a small dredge in here. The dredge we use for the federal channel could never fit in there. We've had small dredges come in before. It's very, very expensive to mobilize them and difficult for them to operate, so we like this. And put this into context, we removed 637 cubic yards, about $20 per cubic yard. It seems a little expensive compared to the federal channel dredging that's 120,000 cubic yards at about $7 a cubic yard, but there's an economy of scale associated with this. So $20 per cubic yard for this is actually a really good deal. So really pleased working with Port San Luis and my staff on this. They did a great job. We had another project that's very unique for us, a pile driving project out in Marina 4. One thing I'd like to note about Marina 4 is, especially 4B towards the end, this is really exposed to southeast storms. And in 1983, after that, the historic El Nino, those docks were completely damaged and destroyed. So the exposure, if you ever want to go out and see Mother Nature in all its glory, try to walk to the end of Marina 4B in a strong southeaster. Those docks really move up and down. They were rebuilt in the mid-1980s, but some of the piles were concrete and some of the leftover ones were wood. In Santa Barbara Harbor, just about every one of our docks are double-wide docks, which means that two boats fit essentially in one single slip. You have a finger dock on one side of the boat, not both. It's kind of a problem for the longer slips because they are so big and the loads are so high on the finger docks themselves. There's a mooring pile in the middle. So a guide pile is a pile that goes in the dock and keeps the docks in place, and then the mooring pile is just another point for big boats to tie up to. Commissioner Sloan had a boat on Marina 4B. He probably can attest to all of these things. So we had a problem at Marina 4B. This isn't Marina 4B, this is Marina 1, but just to put it in, to give you some perspective, the mooring pile broke. It had probably not been replaced after the 1983 El Nino was wooden and it broke off. So the large boats out there on those 51-foot slips were really exposed. So we had a serious problem to replace the pile. One thing we cannot do here in Santa Barbara Harbor, we don't have the capacity to replace piles, or we haven't before this recent project. We would have to hire a barge-mounted crane, probably at a minimum of $30,000 just to mobilize one to get here. This is one on a what we call a flexi float, where they actually build the barge at the dock and then drive the crane out on it. It's really cost prohibitive, especially to do a single pile. So whenever a single pile breaks, we just kind of walk away from it and wait till others break, or there's some sort of economy of scale to do a bunch at the same time, or if there's a pile driving project in the harbor, which are pretty infrequent. So we were kind of we're at a quandary as what to do in this particular area, because those docks really, you almost really couldn't use them. So working with Port San Luis again, we borrowed a pile hammer that they use and deploy from a forklift on the Hartford Pier. The Hartford Pier is a wooden pier. It's pretty long, similar to ours on Stearns Wharf. Cars go out on it. And they had a settlement years ago from Unocal for some hazardous soils remediation. So they have a lot of nice pile driving equipment, one of which is this pile driver. So they do all their pier maintenance, and our staff went up and observed it and looked at it and said, well, we think we could do this. We think we can do this from the Danny Sea. So what they did is we borrowed it from Port San Luis. My staff built this frame as a guide for the pile. So when there's a pile out in the middle of the ocean, it's really hard to figure exactly where to put it. And as most of you know, that slip widths and lengths are at a premium. We are right on the inch. We don't go off 1 inch one way or another, or else we could have a conflict with the boaters. So staff had kind of an ingenious invention. They built this frame. They attached it to both sides. We jetted out the pile stub, and a diver went down and marked the exact location of where the pile is, so that we knew we could put this pile back in the same spot. So O'Brien's going to show a little video. I think if you go towards the bottom of it, you'll see, just take there you go, right there, and hit the, boom. So this is Port San Luis's pile hammer on top of a pile. This is a 45-foot long pile. We discovered that's about as long a pile as we could drive. Out on the wharf, they're 60 to 65 feet long, depending on the depth. But fortunately, this took, this is a little bit speeded up. It probably took a minute and a half, 90 seconds, to actually drive the pile. It's in the exact location as the old pile. It followed the old hole down. So this particular project worked out really well. We're really pleased that we have this method for replacing piles within the harbor. Here's the finished product. You'd never know it was ever gone if you didn't see it before that it was gone. So it worked great, and kudos to my staff working with Port San Luis and their staff coming down to do this. So this is something we'll see more of as we get large storms and piles break out, especially some of the older ones. And finally tonight is the underground storage fuel tank replacement. I reported to the Harbor Commission in October about this project. As many of you know, the state requires single-walled underground storage tanks to be, fuel tanks to be replaced with double-walled tanks by 2025. Santa Barbara Fuel Dock, our tenant, has been proactive about securing funds and moving forward with this project. There are existing 4 10,000-gallon tanks. You can kind of see them here. They're sort of right in the middle of Harbor Way down there, and they're going to replace them with 2 20,000-gallon tanks. This is a highly regulated project by the Santa Barbara County Public Health Department, CUPA, the Certified Unified Program Agency. They regulate businesses that operate above and below ground tanks for the public, for the benefit of the public and the environment. This particular project was delayed significantly. As of October, they did not have the approvals or the permits, so they had to go back, and they had a tentative start date of late March. Here's the orientation's kind of different. There's 2 tanks. They're bigger, larger diameter. They're going to be a little bit deeper, so we'll have to deal with a little more dewatering. But because of the changed tanks, they had to develop some shoring plans and some dewatering calculations that had to go to the building department, CUPA, and it finally got approved last week. So we've upped the start date to the beginning of, the middle of February, February 18th. Everything's been approved. We're meeting with them tomorrow, as a matter of fact, to get copies of all the permits and insurance, which we'll share with the city attorney and risk management. And we'll have another meeting with the public. We put together a sign plan, businesses open during construction, pedestrian detours, all kinds of stuff like that, because this is going to be one of the most disruptive projects ever in the harbor commercial area since the last time they replaced the tanks in the 80s. But we're there, Santa Barbara Fuel Dock, we're pleased to be working with them. For them to commit the kind of funding necessary to do this is significant. We're working with the fish market. They're going to close and do a remodel concurrent with this. So we'll coordinate the effort with the tenants and let the public know we're open for business. Should be about 4 weeks of very disruptive construction, followed up with probably another 4 to 6 weeks of commissioning the tanks, which is going to be less disruptive, and we'll have circulation again. We'll be reporting out on this on a regular basis since it is such an important project. That concludes my presentation tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Spicer.
Thank you, Mr. Triberg. Because I enjoy construction, I just have a couple questions. On the pile driving, did the old pile need to be extracted, and how was that done? And then my follow-up question is, the new pile, what is the material? Is it wood, metal, fiberglass, concrete, anything like that?
Chair Stedman, Commissioner Spicer. Yeah, we extract the old pile. It breaks off, and then we cut it above the mud line. You tie a line to it essentially and pull it with the Danny C, but it won't pull out because of so much friction. So what we do is we actually jet alongside of it. Many piles are jetted in or have a tube where you just push water through it, and it sort of creates a slurry, liquefies the sand so you can kind of move it through. In this case, we kind of liquefy the sand so we can pull the stub out. It was kind of interesting because once we pulled the old stub out, we actually measured down 12 feet, which is really pretty deep. You know, normally getting 10 to 15 feet of embedment's hard to do to begin with, and when you pull an old pile, it tends to cave in, so it kept the old hole in place. These piles are wood. The only ones we deal with are wood. We have an inventory of wood, all for Stearns Wharf. We don't really deal with concrete or steel piles. It's the least expensive and the easiest to work with. So yeah, we removed the old pile. This one's exactly in the exact same spot, driven to the exact same depth and the same height, and we're really pleased that it worked out as well as it did.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
A quick comment. On both the interior dredging and the pile solution, I think it's good for us to hear. It's a really creative and effective solution to these things. I think it's good for us to hear things like this. So I'm glad to see them in here, and congratulations to Mr. Triberg and the staff, and kudos to you. I don't really know what a kudo is, but I know they're good, and you should have some. So thanks.
Yeah, I have a question, Carl. And I agree with Lang on the ingenuity that you've demonstrated to us. The Danny C seems to get a lot of work. So how does it get down here? And how do you get a 45-foot crane and all this other stuff that you're describing from Port San Luis?
Chair Stedman, the Danny C is home ported in Santa Barbara. It's the Castagnolo family. Yeah, it's a 77-foot utility vessel. So they get all our work because they're there. I don't have to mobilize another ship in from Port Hueneme or someplace like that.
So what are we getting? So the pile driver came from Port San Luis?
Yeah, so the pile driver and the pump, they're not that big. They fit on the back of a truck.
Okay.
We get all the hose and everything else. And then the Danny C has their lifting capacity is 10 tons. So they pretty much can lift all that stuff onto their deck. We also had to use a compressor and I can't think of it. Anyway, a compressor and some other equipment that we had to load on with a crane because it was kind of heavy. But yeah, we work it all out with them, and the staff at Port San Luis was great. They sent somebody down to kind of help us out, and we're helping them out with fiberglass jackets on their piles, teaching them that technology. So there's this little exchange that works quite well. Yeah, so they're a great group to work with.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so I guess it's time for the fun stuff, right? We're gonna move on. Thank you very much, Carl. We're gonna move on to the Harbor Operations Report.
It's all fun.
Yes, yes, it's all fun, Eric.
Which one am I clicking here? Okay, thank you. Chair Stedman, Commissioners, just a quick recap with the boat parade, Parade of Lights. Next slide, thanks. We had our 33rd annual boat parade, and it was on Sunday, December 8th. And due to the small craft advisories, it was kind of touch and go whether or not it was going to happen. At about 3:30 in the afternoon, our staff, along with the Coast Guard, were monitoring weather, and we saw a break in the weather. And although there were still small crafts posted, we decided to go ahead and continue because the weather in our area was just flat calm. It just turned out great. So the Coast Guard, we decided to collectively just go ahead with the event. The 13 participants that participated, they did a great job, one decorating their boats in foul weather, but it wasn't a selfless act. Their odds of winning prize were about 3 to 1 that they would win. So nobody left without winning something during this boat parade. This year's theme was Deep Space Holidays, and our first place winners went to the commercial fishing boat Perseverance by Bernard Friedman. Commercial other was the vessel Channel Keeper by Ben Pitterly. Powerboat Coconut won by Aaron and Nicole, Laferriere. And then we had the sailboat Sugar. They took their grand prize by Gary and Susan Paulitsky, and the human-powered was won by Gary Longaberger in a kayak that unfortunately overturned in its slip. We want to thank all those that participated, and we thank the Harbor Merchants Associations, Wharf Merchants Association, the Santa Barbara Yacht Club, the Harbor Marine Works, and all of these folks stepped up and donated incredible prizes, including wine, gift certificates, boat haul-outs, and cold hard cash. The award ceremony at the Maritime Museum concluded the festivities with dinner buffet provided by Chuck's Waterfront Grill. Be sure to mark your calendars for next year's event, which will be Sunday, December 13th. Next. As you can see, the weather, winter weather is upon us, and with one of our first storms, which was bigger storm, which was December 26th, we had 2 vessels run aground, one off Ledbetter and one off East Beach. The vessel off Ledbetter was noticed on the beach at daybreak and began breaking apart in the surf. Well, big shout out, a quick thanks to the Harbor Facilities Department. That staff went out there, quick response, assistance in cleaning up all the debris field that was scattered all the way from Ledbetter Cove along the beach to the yacht club. In this case, we had a very responsible owner who stayed on scene and took full responsibility of cleanup and disposal of his vessel, and that boat was cleaned up within, I believe, 24, 48 hours, 2 days. The same morning, we had another vessel that went aground, where we are right here, went aground on East Beach, and though it didn't break up, causing immediate public safety concerns, the city of Santa Barbara did step in 72 hours later and remove the vessel from the beach as the owner sort of stepped away from the boat, and we haven't been able to get a hold of him since. Currently, the department is looking into Harbors and Navigation Code, and we're going to pursue the owner through collections for cost of cleanup. And then on January 5th, we had another little storm that came in, and a vessel washed up in county property. It's still currently on the beach, and all that information has been forwarded to the Sheriff's Department and for further follow-up. So in these 2 storms, we actually did pretty well. 3 boats on the beach. And speaking of boats on the beach, we recently were awarded our SAVE Grant Award, and the Waterfront Department submitted a grant application for the Surrendered and Abandoned Vessel Exchange, aka SAVE. We were notified in December that we did in fact receive or were awarded the grant in the amount of $70,000 for the next 2 years pending City Council approval. This program has assisted the department with, in the past, paying for derelict and abandoned vessels disposal, and the vessels would otherwise end up in our open anchorage, eventually breaking free and causing public safety and environmental issues as the ones mentioned before. Oh, you know what? This is about how quick it takes to clean a boat off the beach. The contractor here is Marburg Industries, and Brian Borgatello, I have a great relationship with him, and every time I call him and say, hey, we've got some issues concerning public safety, he gets a crew down there, and they clean this up really quick, as you can see. And this video was provided by a friend of mine, Mike Long. And last, on recent things that we've been working on with the Harbor Patrol, we started an online safety and security survey. As part of the performance measures, we are conducting this survey to identify security issues within the harbor and Stearns Wharf. We hope to receive constructive feedback because we do really want to improve upon and make changes as needed. We hope that this project will assist us with our goal to provide the community with the best public service possible. And moving forward, this proactive approach to community policing and the Harbor Patrol Division thinks the importance of this public participation will be a critical part of the process. You can take the 16-question survey online at surveymonkey.com/r/harbor security. And that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Eric. On the Sunflower Gale, was that anchoring issue or a navigation error, or how did it end up on Leadbetter?
Chair Stedman, Commissioner Sloan, we don't know because it happened at night, not for sure. We sort of suspect there is a current that we have our long-short current that runs along the coast, and then we have another current that sort of eddies and wells off of that. We believe that the Sunflower Gale was out far enough, and whether their anchor or any of their ground tackle failed, it was caught in that area and actually pulled back up the coast instead of making it down coast as what we would normally see.
Have we ever seen that before, go around Stearns Wharf? And
well, if they're far enough offshore, every once in a while, yes.
Yeah,
we do find, yes, kayaks. We found kayaks up off of UCSB, Point Conception. So there is a current that's out there that does pull things up the coast as opposed to going down coast.
so the supposition is that it was a anchor failure rather than a navigational error?
Yes, that vessel was at anchor.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of same question for these other two craft, that were they either of them on mooring tackle, or were they just anchored out?
So all three of these vessels were farther east of the city regulated mooring area that we've discussed in the past. These were not on regulated moorings. These are folks that drop a hook and don't pay any money and are sitting out there. So those were the three boats that did go on the beach. None of the vessels in our mooring program broke loose.
Yes, Commissioner Nelson.
I'm curious, what is the nature of our relationship with the Division of Boating and Waterways? It's only a $70,000 grant. I know that's small, but do we do other projects with them? I mean, what's the sort of suite of funds that we receive from them or don't receive from them?
Chair Stedman, Commissioner Nelson, we've received millions of dollars in grants and loans from them. We received the lion's share of the SAVE grant funds, actually. $70,000 is a pretty generous award from those guys. It was administered under a couple of different acronyms in the past, but it's the same program. So we've done quite well. There's not a lot of free anchorages anywhere in California, and the fact that they've kind of provided these grant funds to clean them up has been a huge benefit to us, Richmond, City of Richmond, places like that. But what they're mostly known for is their grant and loan programs. Grants are mostly related to public access, like launch ramps. Since I've been here, we've gotten a little under $1 million to rebuild a launch ramp. And then loans, they have a big loan program for public marinas. So Marina One was funded with, $14 million in loans. We spent $12 million. So, yeah, we've been working with them for
So
years.
the harbor's capital budget relies to a great extent on the availability of funding from
Well,
this
not,
program, or
sort of, yeah. On the grant side of things, it's kind of nice, and they have some other smaller grant programs. On the lending side, their terms aren't the best. You could probably get a private issue for slightly less, depending on the state of the economy at any given time. But in general, a lot of public marinas will borrow from the Division of Boating and Waterways, and that's what we did at the time. At the time, it was a really good rate. The economy took a dive, the rates went down, so it wasn't quite as good, but we were able to renegotiate from a 30 to 20-year term, saving us well over $1 million. So they're a little challenging to work with because they are a state agency, and there's a process and a bureaucracy, but it's a good source of funds, and when we move on to replacing Marinas 2, 3, and 4 in the future, we'll take a good hard look at their funding and compare it to a private issue or something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Eric. So this boat, Felicity, that's east of Wilt's End, how far into the county line is it?
So it's about 150 yards into the county. And we, in the past, with the county and the city, we both will share funds that we receive from our grants. It's called a grant exchange. And when the sheriff's department, and they've exhausted all avenues, and if they do not have a grant in place, they may come to us for cleanup. And it's sort of a mutual aid sort of relationship, and we would certainly accommodate that.
So it's not posing any safety hazards right now?
It could be a safety hazard. If you had children playing on the boat and they fall off, yes, absolutely. But not the kind of safety hazard we had with Sunflower Gale as it's breaking up in big chunks and nails and broken glass and shrouds. This vessel's still intact.
Interesting. Thank you. All right. I guess if there are no further reports, we come to commission and staff communications. So would anybody like to make any comments? Commissioner Kramer?
Yeah, I will report on the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Committee. We'll be meeting on, I believe it's Monday, the January 27th, from 2 to 3:30 in the afternoon. They'll be in room 15, which is the end of this room here. Public is welcome, I guess. Sure, no, not I guess. Public is welcome. I'm not sure what we'll be talking about. It'll be the last meeting until May of the committee. And I believe that there'll be a public meeting, do you know, Carl, when that is? Sometime in February, about the state, where the city is on this. And then there'll be another one after that also.
Chair Stedman, Commissioner Kramer, this next meeting will be the last of the subcommittee comprised of council members, yourself and Commissioner Sloan, planning commissioners, water commissioner, et cetera, and parks
Until
commission.
May. I mean,
Until May. So this is our last meeting before we release the draft Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan. It'll be released shortly after our next meeting, and then it's going to be taken to all the boards and commissions. So the March Harbor Commission meeting is when we'll be presenting the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan, the draft plan. So I'll probably make a presentation at that time. It'll go to the Parks Commission, Water Commission, Planning Commission, and everybody else before they gather all the comments and respond accordingly, and then it'll go to council probably in June, I believe. I think they're going to try and get there by the end of the fiscal year. So that's the rough schedule for it.
Well, Melissa Hetrick gave a very interesting presentation on Tuesday at the city council, and if anyone's interested, might look at the video of it. Her PowerPoint is not posted online as of yet, but it'd be worth taking a look at it.
Yeah, Chair Stedman, Commissioner Kramer, that was the vulnerability assessment,
Right.
and that's just a separate study just related to the city's vulnerabilities associated with the Coastal Commission directed guidance related to sea level rise in 2060 and 2100. The adaptation plan will be talking about, how we
Right.
can adapt. And the meeting is open to the public, and the public will be encouraged to comment on the draft document. We'll have more details here at a future Harbor Commission meeting, and then anybody can comment at any time. And it will all be online.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to make a comment. I want to, just not to be gratuitous, but I want to again congratulate incoming Director Wiltshire. So we look forward to working with you. And I also want to thank you, Carl, personally for your service to the commission and to the city in this acting role. And to you too, Brian. You guys did an outstanding job. And to you too, Eric. So on behalf of the commission and myself, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair Stedman. We appreciate it. And just for your information, we're going to meet with Mike tomorrow morning and probably have a couple of meetings over the next few weeks before he begins to try and make this as much of a seamless transition as we can. So hopefully he'll be up to speed pretty quickly, and look forward to working with him.
Excellent. Excellent. So
I was just going to move to adjourn.
I second that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Meeting is adjourned.